So with all those wonderful potential exercises that we're going to be doing, we are going to start with just a little bit more content, a little bit more sort of facts and figures and that kind of thing. And this is all around systems thinking. But I did want to just pause briefly just to see if anybody had any thoughts, reactions, or additional questions from last time. I think maybe we don't, if there's any I's that need to be dotted or T's that crossed or anything, any reactions? Okay. My next question is, how many people in the room feel like they have the topic for an action plan? Okay. Okay. Can I see? Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah.
Wow.
That's great.
That's great.
Okay. Well, good. So we'll dive into systems thinking, and hopefully this will help you flesh out your action plans and move forward with them. So just briefly for the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about the concept of resilience for an organization, a business, or a community. And systemic thinking tools will be introduced that will help you just think of an alternative way of looking at things rather than just an alternative way of looking at things. Give you some concrete tools that have been used around the world. We're going to do it experientially in the next room shortly. And I'll tell you some fun stories about how they've been used and what the results have been. And just give you something to think about, a different way of looking at your plan and seeing how it's going to work for you. So is there anybody in the room who feels like they would be really comfortable in defining systems thinking? Have you came across the term before or studied it? Okay. I asked the same question to a group full of sustainability officers from Fortune 100 companies, and they didn't put up their hands either, so that's fine. It's just good to know. Systems thinking is basically the way of approaching an organization or an issue in terms of its context and relationships. Often, particularly in Western history, we have been trained to analyze things, to break things down into their parts. That is a perfectly appropriate way of looking at some issues and some organizations at any time. However, there is another way of understanding how an organization or an issue operates, and that is by looking at it in terms of its relationship with other entities or organizations. And that's basically what systems thinking is about. And it can get terribly, terribly complex with lots of diagrams, which I don't really understand. So we won't go into that too much. We'll try to keep it very, very succinct. But you need to know a little bit about what a system is. What is a system? So it's not just anything that's bunched together in a little area. I mean, if you come upon a pile of flotsam on the beach, it's not really a system. A system has a purpose. It has some reason for being. It has some aim. It has boundaries, which we'll talk about a little bit more. It has a hierarchy. I know I've skipped one, which just means it exists within other systems and has subsystems within it. So there's a whole sort of ecosystem, if you will, of operations going on. And it has a property called emergence. It has a property called emergence. And emergence means that there are qualities that exist when the system is operating that are not inherent in the qualities of the individual parts. So you can come across, I'm seeing a bunch of metal and things on the ground. I see a wheel over here and a spoke and an axle and a gear thingy. And they each individually, they have qualities. They're made of metal or they're this many years old, etc. But it is only when they're put together and become a bicycle that they have the property of being able to transport a person. So that property of being a transportation device is emergence. So that systems have qualities that are not necessarily inherent in the parts if you're separated out. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it as we go on. A little bit more about boundary, and this is something that should be very familiar to us all now because we've talked about the business case for sustainability and how businesses operate within a society and within the larger environment. Even though some people may see those two outer circles as switched, some people see the environment as a subsystem of society, and that's how a lot of our problems have come about, right? Because we think, oh, well, it's our Earth. We can just sort of, keep throwing things away or keep taking things out of it, and it's not really going to matter. So it's really, we exist within the environmental system, and that's an important thing. And a lot of businesses get into trouble or get into challenges or find opportunities when they ask themselves, what are the boundaries of my organization? It's almost an ethical decision, right? If you're say an energy company, and you say, well, the boundaries of my business are right around the four walls of my company. I'm not responsible for anything that happens outside of that. And yet you are, because you're operating within all these kinds of relationships and inflows and outputs. You're, for instance, maybe a manufacturer is putting things into the water supply. Well, I'm not responsible for the river. That's not the boundary of my system. And this is how some of these problems have come about. We draw our boundaries a little too narrowly, and everybody says, well, I'm just responsible for this bit here. It doesn't matter to me if my employees are sick when they go home or if they're overworked, because that's their time. My system does not encompass their well-being. So there are all kinds of ways of looking at how you draw the boundary of your system that will have enormous consequences moving forward. So there are several kinds of systems. There's beautiful natural systems, right? Mangrove forests that have these entire flows and outputs and products that work together. There are engineered systems that we have created, like this is the world's underwater cable system, which is an extraordinary piece of engineering. But we're going to be talking about human systems, otherwise known as soft systems in complexity science. And I just wanted to note that the idea of looking at a system in context and as a question of relationships has been going on for millennia. We are programmed to think about our existence, our organizations, in terms of stories. And stories are a basic way of explaining a system. So that this painting, the 16th century painting by, does anybody know? Bruegel, very good. The 16th century painting by Bruegel was an attempt to encompass, to explain an entire system of behavior through this sort of holistic approach of a painting, right? He didn't like put little pieces around it or have several tableaus all over the place. He said, I'm going to show you the entire system of it working at once. And this is something that human beings can do quite naturally, but we tend to almost forget it when we start looking at our business and work life. So why systemic thinking is merely basically the application of systems thinking, the idea of a system, understanding something in terms of context and relationships, is in applying it to people situations. And the tools that we will use have been developed because they uncover the wisdom that resides in a group at all levels. Now, I'm sure that none of you have ever worked in an office where maybe the person down the hall had a piece of information that they weren't sharing because it was just sort of easier that way. That's never happened to anybody, right? No, I didn't think so. No. Okay, so, well, just imagine that it did, right? So there is all kinds of wisdom in this room that people may not feel comfortable sharing at this point, or maybe they didn't feel comfortable in the first session, but they feel comfortable sharing now. And there's all kinds of wisdom resident in the community of Benicia that is extraordinary, that our action plans are probably going to elicit. So that's kind of the idea around that. Systemic thinking gives us the broadest range of options to act, right? It gives us many different ways of approaching an issue, which is particularly important for some of the very complex situations that we're looking at now. It enables cross-sector pollination. I just happen to like bees, but it allows people to talk to each other, basically. It encourages transparency, which is clarity, honesty, and it engages all the stakeholders. Again, back to that boundary system drawing. Okay? The goal is resilience. I couldn't resist this. Resilience is the ability to recover after disruption. As I'm sure you remember by now, I chose a dancer on purpose, A, because I happen to love dancing, but I also think it's a good example. For one brief 6-month period in my life, I was in perfect physical condition. It's a long time ago. But what I realized is that perfect physical condition, just like perfect organizational condition, is a combination of 3 factors. Strength, you need a lot of muscle, right? You need the strength. Endurance, you can't just chug and then die. You got to chug and keep on going. Endurance and flexibility. If your muscles are really tight and you do a sudden movement, they'll break unless you're warmed up, unless you're flexible, right? So combining those aspects in a business and organization in an action plan are essential for its success if it's going to address a complex issue. So I keep using this word complexity. For us here in this room tonight, complexity has a very particular definition. Okay, Something can be complicated that is not necessarily complex. We won't go into the whole idea, but basically complexity is a situation where the cause and effect are not clearly visible. And they often are only visible after an event or after an issue has taken place. So cause and effect are only visible in retrospect. There are infinite, sometimes almost infinite, interacting variables. And there is usually no single solution to a complex issue. Can anybody think of an example of a complex issue that we might face in Benicia or anywhere else? Climate change. Climate change is the classic example. What else? Parking, yeah. Uh-huh.
In Benicia, there's very few places to park, but they also don't want people to park their cars, but they don't have enough public transportation to justify it.
Exactly. So you fix little bits of the problem, and then the system breaks down other places.
Like they put up bike racks, but then everybody got upset because they put down the wrong bike racks.
Maybe they didn't engage enough stakeholders on that decision making, right? It happens, right. Other examples of complex issues?
The CINO project.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
The CINO project.
The CINO project.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And why would that be complex?
Well, it's 500 plus acres, and a builder with a reputation for not following through with what he has promised to do. And a number of people who want to build quickly, and a number of people who want to take time looking at the situation. And some people will never trust no matter what. Some people, there's no single solution. Infinite interacting.
Infinite variables, exactly. And again, if you try to address just one little piece, maybe with a rule or a law, you find that it has all these other cascading effects, right? These after effects that we didn't think of. For instance, one of the classic examples is, oh, I know, this is a great idea. Let's make fuel out of corn, right? And of course, what ends up is that the price of corn shoots up because everybody thinks this is going to be the next energy bonanza, and a lot of people go hungry. 1 million more people go hungry in the world, or 1 billion more, or whatever it is. That this was not thought through systematically. It was not thought through as what are the consequences of this action, and what are the sort of little dominoes that are going to fall each time that I make these big decisions. So, and it is complicated because we in the West, in particular, are very attuned to wanting to just fix it and move on. We just want to fix it, get the solution, just invent something that'll fix it, and then we go. And this is one of the hardest things about complex situations, like climate change, for instance, is that there probably is no one single tech fix. There's nothing that's going to be invented, even if they made a car that ran on water, for instance. I mean, think about that a minute. How many consequences is that going to have for water supply, for instance? So it's very tough to grapple with that, and it requires mental resilience as well. So a lot of people have started to use systemic thinking. From the White House, they incorporated it in a couple of executive orders. The Armed Forces is actually very advanced in looking at the world in terms of relationships and complexity. The EPA, state, local governments, regional governments, and even small business associations right on through. So it's a theme that's starting to percolate through our society, and it's probably a good thing since we have such complex issues to deal with. And then these are some of the tools. We won't go into all of these right now. We're going to be playing with conversation mapping today. But I did want to just give you a couple of examples of stories, because stories help us understand complexity, of the application of systemic thinking tools in the business world, for instance. So our guru at the Green MBA, who comes and leads us through this sort of series of labs to take on these tools and to be able to bring them out to other people, works a lot with very large multinational corporations. And one of them, which shall remain nameless, but you've all heard of, which is an enormous multi-global pharmaceutical company, hired him to sort of look at some of the efficiencies in their system. They wanted to speed up how they were making pills or whatever it was. And he doesn't know anything about making pills, right? He's not an expert, but he has an ability to come in and engage everybody in the room with these various tools. So one of the things that one person came up and said, you know, what's always been bothering me is the reason for this beautiful loop that we have in all our assembly lines. We have this pill assembly line that goes like this at one time, and I'm assuming that has something to do with slowing down the process so that the pills have time to rest before the next stage or something like that. And they engaged in these systemic thinking tools, and they tried to figure out who knows the answer, who knows the answer, who knows the answer. And what it turned out is that in the original building where these pills were being made, there was a column right in the middle of the room, and the assembly line had to go around it. And that knowledge had become embedded, and those plans were passed along to all these global places where these same pills are being made, and nobody thought to question, step back, look at it, like, why? Why is this happening? And so, long story short, they changed the plans and they saved the company, you know, millions and millions and millions of dollars, though obviously they did have to retool. So there are lots of examples. There's another example of a famous soft drink company, which again shall remain nameless, and they had come out with a new kind of packaging, and they were kind of stumped because they couldn't figure out why it wasn't selling very well. They couldn't figure out why it wasn't selling very well, and it had something to do. They talked to all the heads, the packaging design vice president and the vice president of distribution. And he had no idea what's going on. Well, it must be something wrong with the color, all that. And what they did is they got a sample of people from all levels of the company into the room using these kinds of tools that sort of let everybody speak in turn. And what they found out is that the drivers, for whatever reason, had been coming in, and the store people didn't like the color of the packaging, but they said, well, here's a space underneath. Can you put it on the lowest shelf? So these drivers were coming in, putting it on the lowest shelf, where it was out of eye line of all the customers, and it was not getting bought, and people weren't picking it up. And nobody had asked, and they didn't feel that they could say anything. So there were these unconscious barriers that were being erected. So these tools are just sort of things to break down some of those barriers. And they've been used, again, all over the place, and in the Bay Area, of course, in nearby Antioch. This is an example of a conversation map that was used around the development of a community climate action plan. And this was another multi-stakeholder summit that was put together to try to talk about how to bring green planning to the state of California. And it brought people who were definitely at odds with each other into the same room, which is always an interesting experience. This is an example of, actually, Sarah, do you want to speak to this? Biodiesel Roundtable?
Our Biodiesel Roundtable that brought in experts from California, the Bay Area, and across the country to talk about how to increase the usage of biodiesel. And we spent about a day using all of these systemic tools. And as one person put it, I can't believe it. The information that you got, we did the same thing, but it took us a week, and you got it in a day.
Right. Right. So it's a way of gathering information in a quick way and in a safe way, because a lot of the people in that room were kind of bound by hierarchy. So it's a way of getting around that, or there were competitors in that room, right, who normally weren't too comfortable speaking to each other. So it was a very interesting process. Okay. And one of the commonalities of systemic thinking tools is backcasting is a particular word used by the organization called the natural step, but it's just the concept of starting with the picture of future success and working backwards. And there's a very simple neurological reason for this, is that if you start where you are, you already tend to not be able to think as creatively as possible, because you immediately start to tell yourself, well, the next step could be this, and you start to think of all the reasons why it can't be. It's normal, it's human. But if you start with a future success that sort of makes you look up, makes you breathe in, and makes you think about something as it could be in the future, so there's time to figure out how to get there, but draw that picture of success first and then work your way backwards. And that's been proved to be very helpful in situations that are particularly complex. So backcasting is something that we'll be sort of looking at and trying to infuse into our action plans to make sure that they're as big thinking and creative as they possibly can be. So we are going to be doing some conversation mapping. Is everybody ready to get up? Okay. Don't get up yet. what is a conversation map? It is a way of, it's just, all it is there is a central idea in the middle of a table, and everybody gets a pen. I think we need to get out the colored pens. I'm not sure where they are. Are they? Oh, they are in the other room. Okay, great. And you have a pen, and your pen is your voice. And instead of talking, you write your conversation. Okay? And this is a way of, imagine if you had this room of everybody talking at once. It would be chaotic, right? You would go, oh my God, I can't get a hold of this. And then it would be gone. And it's just a way of capturing all of these conversations in a quick way, in writing, and of developing the thoughts in a rapid way. And then there's another step after that, but we'll worry about that shortly. Okay? So we are going to be doing conversation mapping. We have, in the other table, 3 conversation maps. There are not very many rules. The idea, as I said, is to capture the conversation on the map, and your pen is your voice. No more than 6 or 8 main branches. So you have this central idea, and then some brave soul is going to be the first person to react to that idea and say something about it. And then another person can either respond in writing to that person, draw a circle and attach to that idea, or they can do another reaction to the central idea. It sounds more complicated than it is. It's really pretty easy. Ideally, in each of your responses, just like in any conversation, what's the surest conversation stopper? Yeah, no, maybe, okay. Those are kind of,
Great.
Yeah, what does that mean? What am I supposed to do with that? So a real conversation involves some kind of interaction, which is why we encourage the use of some kind of verb or because or something, a little bit more actionable than that. And then the other idea is because this is a divergent exercise, this is trying to get as much out from all these creative minds here as possible, there are no wrong answers. Okay?
I can use because I said so.
You can. You can. We might have to do something about that. Are there any questions? I know it might seem a little bit theoretical. So here's the central idea, and then these are people writing their responses. So you're supposed to write your response and connect it to whatever you're responding to. No more than 6 or 8 branches from the main idea, but then it just sort of branches out from there like a network.
And you do not have to agree.
Oh, no.
It's good.
We don't want agreement.
That one up there on the left, that whole conversation map was done in the DRC with people who didn't speak English. The entire map would be there in French. And it was very powerful because they didn't agree with each other, but they knew what the conversation was. So it can be done in any kind of organization in any language.
I would add the one in Armenia, they also didn't speak English. And one of the important things that this conversation mapping can do is break down the hierarchy. So you can have a boss, and you can have a secretary, and you can have CEO all working off of the same maps, and no one knows what anybody else has said necessarily, so they're going to respond to it. What we found with that map in Armenia was an unknown hierarchy, which was we were paying too little attention until we realized that the men were telling the women what to write down. So they had to split the tables.
Yep. And that was the same in the Congo, right? You had the men got a chance, and then they had to leave the room, and the women had to give their own.
A little bit of segregation.
Yeah. So there's obviously cultural considerations. Okay. So are there any questions? Yes.
So do you take turns writing, or can anybody follow up on anything?
Anybody can follow up on anything. What I'm going to ask you to do is count off by 3, because we have 3 tables in there. So you'll count off by 3, and then you'll go to either table 1, table 2, table 3. So we'll need somebody to say which table is which. I'm not sure that's on there, but we can work that out.
The answer is everybody. It's a free for all. It's a free for all with your pen, not your mouth.
It's a free for all with your. It's a free for all with your pen, but we're going to ask you to go to your first table, to your table. If you're table 1, if you're counted 1, you go to table 1, and you're going to spend about 15 minutes having a conversation in writing around that topic, and then we'll give you a cue, and you'll go to the next table. Or are we going to? We're going to have the free. Yeah.
So
okay.
this is bad. We found from experience, drawing your circle and trying to fit your words in never works. So write your words.
And then draw your circle. And connect it to the
It
bubble
sounds
you're
like a
talking
dumb thing,
to.
but it's awful if it doesn't work. And also, we don't like this. This is a map, and this is a thought.
The title of this is California's Green Business Programs, but basically California's Green Business Program is your green business program. There is I mean, all of you are aware that there is a green business program in Solano County, right? That's it, okay. And so I'm going to get to that, but I'm going to give you a little sort of background history, how it works and all of that. I don't think anybody here is a certified green business, right? Because I know there's only one in Benicia. Okay. Okay, I looked at Waste. Okay, all right, great. Then you know a little bit about it. Oh, yeah, you know, and I'm trying to, I can't think of the name, and I tried to get to their website, and actually my virus alert went on and basically said that it spreads malicious malware and wouldn't let me go to it. It's something relationships.
Consulting and management.
Yeah, but I think they better address their website. So, anyhow, just a little background. The Finance Center and I myself acted as the Green Business Program Coordinator for the Western region from about 2004 to 2009. US EPA essentially asked us if we would go out and spread the gospel of the Bay Area Green Business Program across California and to other states within the region, so Hawaii, Nevada, and Arizona. Basically so that at least within the state of California, the green business programs were the same and had the same standards. And that was really important because if you certified a Hilton in San Francisco and you had a green business program that did something completely different in Los Angeles and they certified the Hilton, you know, what does green certification really mean? And so when it's called a green business program in California, it means that it has the standards that we're going to talk about in the same background, and as well as the Solano County one. So, I mean, the obvious reason why the program was started, you know, improve environmental performance of businesses, and yeah, helping business do less. And I think a number of you have downloaded the checklist from the website. Has anyone taken a look at the pretty large checklists for the Green Business Program? They're pretty extensive. They cover a lot. Ultimately, they're going to help a business do less by using them. However, it was also started because US EPA wanted regulatory agencies to start working with each other and stop putting so much pressure on businesses by coming at them from a million different directions. So they wanted the regulatory agencies to start talking to each other, and that was actually the impetus behind the California Green Business Program, and the Bay Area Green Business Program was first. It was a go beyond compliance program, and it began in Alameda County in 1997. It's always been underfunded. And in 2005, you created the California Green Business Network. And that is all of the green business programs across the state coming together and working together to develop new checklists and define the program so that across the state they can carry it themselves now and introduce it to new counties who will then have the same program and the same standards. So there are now 12 plus programs, over 2,000 businesses certified. Some of the social benefits, it's not just environmental, a social benefit of a green business. Of course, employee health and safety. If you're reducing toxic use and any kind of hazardous waste materials that you're getting rid of, you're going to have better employee health and safety. Employees tend to really like the program. They like the fact that they're engaged with the program, that the management is coming down to the lower levels of the employees and saying, okay, guys, you're in this, we're all in this together. How are we going to make this happen? And it gets a lot of favorable response from the employees, a lot of satisfaction. It's obviously good for customer education and awareness. One of the things that I've always heard from the businesses that I've known that have been certified green, the thing that they love the most is they actually end up having a relationship with their regulators. They actually surprise themselves and find out that, wow, they kind of like them. And some of them have become friends. Okay. This just gives you an idea of where the Green Business Program is. Primarily, it's Bay Area. We helped establish Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, and San Diego. Santa Monica also has one, but that's actually just a city program. It is not a county program. And I'll talk a little bit about why city programs actually aren't quite as strong and cannot certify businesses like counties can. So since it started, it's just gotten, I wouldn't say huge because these are not huge numbers of businesses, but it's gotten huge for the green business programs themselves. Because they're all underfunded, they're all kind of backed up. San Francisco's been at it for not very long. They've got 170 already. They've got 175 businesses that they're working with. And this was as of 2010. They had 100 on the waiting list. What this doesn't include in these statistics is that every 3 years, a business has to be recertified. So I think San Francisco was looking, on top of the 100 on the waiting list, they were actually looking at about 55 recertifications that year as well. So you have a very, and actually San Francisco is probably one of the best staffed. A lot of these people are working with just half-time personnel, and that's it, one half-time FTE. Solano County started in 2007. It has 8 green businesses and 1 in Benicia. And I will talk about that in a minute. So one of the most important parts of the Green Business Program is who their partners are. And by and large, their partners are the regulators. So it's the Water District, it's the BAQMD, it's the DTSC, and so on. And primarily also it is the CUPAs. Does everyone know what a CUPA is? Certified Unified Program Agency, right, exactly. Basically, it is the entity that is responsible for regulating those businesses that use and or generate a certain amount of hazardous materials, hazardous waste. Okay, so, and because most of the regulators are at the county level, you want a county program. Because if it's only a city program, then you don't get those county regulators, therefore you cannot certify businesses that actually use hazardous materials or generate hazardous waste. Yeah.
About cities where the CUPA is a fire department?
It can't. Yeah. It depends. If the CUPA is within the city, like city of San Francisco is also a county, so that works. It depends, but by and large, because you also have county water districts and you have the air quality management districts, and it's better at a county level. Although it doesn't necessarily mean it stretches across the entire county either. The Santa Barbara County really is only sort of the Santa Barbara area. The rest of it wasn't too keen on green business. So basically the drivers behind the industries that they have created checklists for are the regulators. However, businesses and industries that do want certification that aren't included in their checklist can approach the green business programs. Nail salons have been trying that for a long time, but that's a tricky one. They use a lot of toxic materials, and so it hasn't been approved yet. They tend to only deal with business types that have a direct relationship to the public, because otherwise, being a green business doesn't have a whole lot of value. The whole idea here is that you're a green business and the public sees that and then hopefully increases their usage of you. So a business-to-business type business is a tougher sell. And they actually found that out with printers. When they first targeted printers, it was one of their first industries. It was kind of a big failure, except for the little mom and pop printers, because the big printers they were going after serviced other larger businesses. And they really didn't have a whole lot of interest. So these are the checklists that are available right now. As you will see, the vast majority of them are regulated industries, but you do have office and retail. You've got a basic checklist for that. Schools, wineries, I actually do think I don't know if they do anything hazardous. Do they? Okay. So yeah, most of them, and these are industries that have been identified by the regulators as we would like you to target them.
So for garment cleaners, the fact that they have a sign up in their thing that they use organic, blah, 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 and the place doesn't stink so much when you walk in.
Okay.
Until they get this additional thing, that's their call.
That's their call, because if you are a certified green business program, green business, then it means you do not use perchloroethylene, that you are essentially a wet cleaner. There are other products out there that are trying to call themselves green. And Susan, you probably can remember, what are the names of them?
There's liquid CO2, which actually
well, that's also yeah.
Okay, but those are the only two that get
certified.
In the business program, there's only 2 products that are allowed certification. There's something called Green Earth that was around that really was just a greenwashing kind of thing.
Yeah.
In fact, it was very,
They won't certify any of the light hydrocarbon that you're talking about. They won't certify that. EPA is still looking at it, from what we understand.
What I think is funny is that the dry cleaners that go under this organic thing is, well, perchloroethylene is a volatile organic compound. So
Yes, well, if they say they're an organic cleaner, don't expect them to be a truly green cleaner. Yeah, exactly. Only if they're certified green, then they're more than likely a wet cleaner, because I don't think we even have CO2 cleaners in the Bay Area.
Just one other thing to just throw in is this year the governor signed a bill
Green Business Program Network. You did sign it. Good. All right. Okay. Cool. So just a snapshot of the results of the Green Business Program. This is Santa Cruz County, 199 green businesses. This is just from 2010. Some pretty nice results, actually. 360 refuse trucks prevented, 342 drums of hazardous materials and waste, 707,000 in savings. So some really nice results. And they actually have just begun to start collecting all these numbers. Unfortunately, we don't go all the way back. Some of the general measures that are required, every business has to do this, is basically you have to engage your customers in the fact that you're green, your employees, and your peers. You have to inform other businesses that you work with down the street next door to you about the Green Business Program. You have to be 100% in compliance with all environmental regulations, and that will be verified with the regulators, and that's why regulators are partners. And you have to complete the minimum number of environmental measures in each of the standards areas that are within the checklists. In order to get certification, you can expect it to take about 2 to 4 months if you're in good shape. It can take up to a year and sometimes longer if you're not. You can expect a visual verification. In other words, this is a third-party certification program, which makes it a much stronger program. It may seem not necessarily comfortable to you to have them come to your business, but there's nothing worse for this type of program than self-certification, and the day after you've given the big award and it's on the front page, the next day there's a leaky pipe that's releasing hazardous materials into the bay, and you get dinged and the program dies. So, and that's happened. That happens. Okay, and obviously there will be compliance inspections, so you can't have had any problems, violations within the last year. Some of the must-dos: you have to purchase recycled content products, you have to replace your incandescents, you have to replace older toilets with higher efficiency models, and they don't bend on that, and that's an expensive one. And especially it's very difficult too if you're in an office building that you don't own. And there are a lot of businesses that haven't been able to qualify because of that. Yeah.
At my former employer, County Connection, they got all the way through it. They got to the toilets because the sewer lines were on easements and old. They wouldn't handle the other kind of toilets. So
Wow.
the thing
Oh.
didn't
Yep.
work.
Yeah. And they won't certify you without it. Yep. I know. And use less toxic cleaning products. And these are just some examples of what you can do, but there are a lot of other things that you choose from. The checklists do not include any kind of compliance requirements. You're responsible for your own compliance, and they don't give you any points for doing anything that puts you into compliance. Everything, all of the measures that they ask you to do and that you adopt to do are beyond compliance. It's a beyond compliance program. Every checklist has been developed for the business sectors that they're supposed to serve, and it's taken them sometimes a year, sometimes more than a year, to develop these checklists. They work them through themselves first, and then they work with industry to get feedback, they beta test so that every one of these checklists fits the industry. After certification, you've probably seen it, you get your logo, they use you in promotions, you're listed in the directories and so on. You're recertified every 3 years. You have to demonstrate continuous improvement. If the business changes ownership, you have to get recertified. If it moves, you have to get recertified. And they do decertify if it doesn't work. So what about Solano? Right now, there's one person. She is in charge of the Integrated Solid Waste Management Plan program. She is not paid at all to coordinate the Green Business Program. Zero money for it. She does it when she has time, so it's completely unfunded. That means that their priority is Cooper-regulated businesses, so businesses that use hazardous materials, generate hazardous waste, because really their goal is to get businesses closer to compliance and then beyond compliance. However, if you want to become a green business, you can apply, and they will eventually get to you, but it will probably take time. And the Solano County Green Business Coordinator left me with one idea, that if the city of Benicia would step up and serve as sort of a local coordinator, an entity that could help businesses go through the checklists, could hold the checklists, distribute them, and let Solano County know which businesses are interested so they can keep that check in order and know what's going on. But if the city of Benicia wanted to help, they would be more than happy to accept that help, and it would speed the process of getting more green businesses in Benicia. So with that, that's a very brief overview of the Green Business Program. Any comments, questions? Yeah.
It's very focused on certain industries. What about home-based businesses?
They have certified some home-based businesses. I mean, what are you thinking of? Is it sort of an office-based business or something like that? Yeah, I mean, some of them have certified it. To be honest, you're low on the list because their goal is compliance and so regulated industry. But home businesses have been certified.
Is the reason that you have that list of priorities like you just suggested because part of it is, dare I say it, PR purposes, they're trying to get maximum impact for the program. And the reason I'm asking is, would it be feasible, like the retail stores we have on First Street, for example, probably don't have lots of issues to deal with, but
yeah, it wouldn't take much.
Bulbs and things like that. Wouldn't it be cool if somebody came through and said, you know, we got 30 businesses that all want to go together and be certified at the same time? That would be a cool project, right? It might move them up on the list to get somebody to go through.
It possibly could. I mean, one of the things, you know, you have to get, well, they're not regulated, so it's a lot easier to certify. Like a dress seller doesn't have to be in or out of compliance. You know? So in that sense, it's pretty easy to go through that office checklist and do what you need to do because it would be an office retail checklist. Whether or not they would come right to you because the program still has to come out and verify that you've done what you said you did. So possibly, if you came up with a large number that they could kill all in one day, very possible. She kind of suggested that, but she didn't want to commit to it.
The problem is if you're talking about those businesses, so eventually they all have the same problem with the plumbing.
The toilet issue is yeah.
That have signs saying that their storefronts aren't safe. I mean, if their storefront isn't safe, I'm sure the plumbing's going to be interesting.
Well, and it is possible. I mean, every program actually tailors itself to the county. So it's entirely possible that Solano County's not focused on their toilets. I haven't seen the Solano County checklist. I couldn't convince her to send them to me. So, yes.
Several years ago, they were talking about the toilets that were considered green, and I think it was 2.5 gallons of water.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what?
It sounds right. Something like that, yeah.
There's a simple way to fix that within your toilets. You have to just bend that rod down until it turns the water off at 2.5 gallons.
You would have to talk to the person who comes out and certifies this. You'd have to talk to the person that would be responsible for certifying the business as to whether or not that would pass. And I'm not sure that it's 2.5 gallons. Their standards, they revisit this every checklist every year.
I've got them all at 2.5 gallons with a
Okay.
mark. I tested them and bent the rod, and they only use 2.5 gallons.
I can't speak to it.
Interesting.
Okay, we good on the green business programs? Okay, great. Thank you. Laura Lee?
So maybe I promise to skip half my slides, and if I give you, I'm sharing